וכי נפשי es Hashem.
Today, page 48 in Tractate Shabbat. Baruch Hashem here from Yerushalayim, from Jerusalem. It's a great pleasure to have the Talmudim, the people here who study together, and we are out of a shelter and we have the freedom to study peacefully. And what we're going to study today, page 58, Nunchet, the Torah law basically is prohibited carry any type of burden from one domain, for example, from Reshut HaYachid to Reshut HaRabim on Shabbat. It's another prohibition to carry within the Reshut HaRabim a Arba Amot, 4 cubits. So now we are not only speaking about burden per se, but we also speaks about situations. For example, we discussed yesterday when women pull out something to show their friends, and while they're doing that, they carry in 4 amot. So we are now in 58a, the very top of the page. Ushmuel Amar, Kavla de'avda tnan. Since we said that we speaks about women carrying a kippah shel tzemer, as the Rif said, which is the some type of head made out of wool. Now the GEMARA elaborate, and Shmuel said it is what we call kavla or kavul for the slave. It's a seal of a slave, and that's what basically we learn in the Mishnah. And the Gemara is not so clear about it. They said, "Umi amar Shmuel achi." Does Shmuel say that our Mishnah speaks specifically about a prohibition against going from one domain to another, to Reshut HaRabim, with the Kavla de'avda, ve'ha'amar Shmuel. Shmuel said clearly, Yotze ha'eved bechotam shebetzavaro. So Rashi said, bechotam shebetzavaro, there's something that he has in his collar, a seal around his neck, a seal around his clothes, avalo bechotam shebiksuto, but not with the seal that is on his clothes. So in other words, what Shmuel tried to say is that a servant can go in the public domain with a slave seal. So now here's the question. Since we mentioned yesterday the kavul in the Mishnah, so what exactly we meant to say it can go to a public domain? It's referred to a seal of a slave. So he said lokashia. So basically the question is how Shmuel allow it. It said lokashia, it's not the question. Ha de avad leirabei, ha de avad ihu lenafshei. Which means what Shmuel allow for a servant to go to a public domain in Shabbat while they're wearing this seal in his neck. It's applied to a servant that his master, his owner, put it in his neck, that he's carrying it. So we don't concern that he take it to Reshut HaRabim. As you know, for example, those of you who went to service, you know, they have those, I don't know if it's a proper word to say doggy, but they have those around the necks, so they carry. So a servant, for the fear of his master, will not take it off and go around for amot, for cubit in the public domain. But in the Mishnah, when we are basically saying that the Mishnah forbidden for a servant to go to Reshut HaRabim, to a public domain, and they use the term kavul, so over there they apply to a seal of a servant, and over there the Mishnah speaks about something that the servant made it for himself. So the master is not so much, is not so carried that he is wearing it every moment. So we're not so concerned. Maybe the servant wants to look like a free person, and therefore he take it off of himself, and then he's going to carry in a public domain. So that's the idea that they forbids to go on Shabbat to a public domain. Excuse me. And Rashi said that's also the reason why they allow him to carry in the yard. So the Gemara asks a question: B'mai okimta leha di Shmuel? What exactly you meant to say when you speak about what Shmuel rules, that the servant can go out to a public domain in Shabbat with his neck, seal of a servant. The avad leirabei, because his master made it for him, and he is concerned that his master will be furious that he take it off, and it's out of fear. So if that's the case, bechotam shebiksuto amai lo. So why Shmuel did not forbid to go with something that he carry on his clothing, since his master made it for him, he must probably have the fear to take it off, and that's basically what the GEMARA said earlier, b'mayu kimta. So they said that Dilma, the reason for that is Dilma mipsak. So b'mayu kimta dadu Shmuel. They ask what exactly Shmuel said that the servant can go with that seal. De avad leirabei, if you say that the master made it for him, if that's the case, bechutam shebeksuto amai lo. So if why may not go with the seal of his own clothes, so there too, since his master made it for him, he will not remove it. So they said the reason is there is concern that Dilma mipsak, that even the servant afraid to take it off with his hand, he is afraid that Dilma mipsak, that maybe somehow perhaps the seal will be severed because it just cut off from his clothing, and it fall to the ground, Rashi said, and it will be broken, umirtat, and he's afraid that his master will think that he did it on purpose, umikapele umachitle akitfei. So what did he do? He placed it on his shoulder so that his master will not see that he has no seal on his clothing, and therefore that's the way he walk in the public domain. So if he does so, what happened? He's basically violated the whole idea of melechet hotza'ah, the prohibition against carrying on Shabbat. Kid Rav Yitzchak Bar Yosef. We learn that the same as Rav Yitzchak Bar Yosef later in Kuf Mem Zayin 147. The Amar, that he hold that this Itzur Hotza'ah, the prohibition against carrying on Shabbat. The Amar Rav Yitzchak Bar Yosef Amar Rabbi Yochanan, היוצא בטלית מקופלת ומונחת לו הכתפיו בשבת חייב חטאת. If a person take the talit or clothing, but let's say talit, he cover over his head, and then he take it off and he put it on his shoulder. So he basically, what he is doing is, he is with clothes folded and resting on his shoulder on Shabbat, is liable for chatat, for sin offering. Why? So he said because it's melechet hotza'ah, because it's carrying it in a public domain, and it's not considering derech malbush, it's not part of the way that people usually carry. And that's what Rashi said. Rashi said that even he didn't take off his talit for himself because his head is still wrapped up with the talit, but anyway, it's considering that carrying a masoi, carrying a burden in a public domain, because people usually don't go in that type of Shulchan Aruch, by the way, in Orach Chaim Shin Aleph, elaborate on that. We will discuss it later. So anyway, so he said that if you speak about the seal on the servant neck, then it's not a chashash. You shouldn't worry about it. So he allowed to get in Shabbat, and you don't concern that maybe the servant will take the pieces of that seal and carry it, because why should he do it? In order to return it to his master, it's the master doesn't need the broken pieces. V'chiha, and what is like what Shmuel said, דאמר לי שמואל לרב חיננה בר שאלה, כולהו רבנן דבי ריש גלותא. All these sages affiliated with the house of Reish Galuta, the head of exile, לא ליפקו בשר בלי חתימי. They should not go with a sealed cloth, which means garment with seal on them. Why? The same as the head of the exile. Why? Because they are concerned that maybe the pieces, the chotamot of the talit will disconnected, and because they have the fear of the head of exile, they folded those pieces on their shoulders in order to hide the place that it's that spot that is missing, and therefore they carry something like that in a public domain. So Rashi said that the head of exile always have this type of formal, it's called Gilunei Malchut. They used to have all kind of formality when they have those type of ceremony, and all the sages that was under his leadership, they used to put a special seal that they show that they are subservient to him, and he was very strict that they shouldn't take it off. Remind me that you work in the Minister of Foreign Affairs, so you know that you need to carry a special sign all the time, right? In the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, right? And then there's a sign that you have to go there. You can get in, you can get out, and you always supervise and watch, and they make sure that you carry it. So lehavdil, that time the people who were subservient to the Reish Galuta, that's the way they used to do it. So he said, levar minach, except for you. Why? Because you, Rav Chinena, you can go with the talit chatuma in the seal of the head of the exile. Why? Because you are so loyal in their eye, so they will not makpi. They officially consider you different. And therefore, even you fold it on your shoulder in order to hide something that is broken or whatever. They treated you differently. So that's the. Not everyone agree with that. The Meiri, the Ritva, and other Rishonim said that it's not apply only to him. Apply all the sages that have a great respect. Because in general we have the rules that whatever the sages put the decree, everyone is equal. It's not that there are some who has in a way they treat it better than the others. It's all equal. So therefore we treat it accordingly. So we continue on the 58. וכי אמר לישמעאל לרב חיננה בר שילה כולו רבנן דבריש גלותא לא ליפקו בשר בלי חתימה לבר מנח דלא כבד עלי דבריש גלותא. So we explain it just to be clear. It was a time of the Reish Galuta that was the authority in Babylon, and the Reish Galuta was the one who basically rules. He had his own independent court, and one of the things that they used to do at that time, it was the shawl, the talit. They had the seal, and since it was an issue of carrying it in the public domain, people felt embarrassed to take it off or to change it, so they basically hide it. They put it in such a status in order not to have the Reish Galuta, the head of the diaspora community, to be makpid, to be angry at them. So that's the reason why Shmuel forbade to go with the talit on Shabbat, and therefore we said, since we're not allowed to a average person, for sure we're not allowed the servant, the slave, to go with something that they see the sign of slavery upon them. Now we go back to our subject, which is the whole issue of servant walking out. Gufa, we turn to the matter itself. אמר שמואל, יוצא העבד בחותם שבצווארו, אבל לא בחותם שבכסותו. Shmuel said that the slave will go out with a seal that is around his neck, but not with the seal that is on his clothes.
Why?
So what's the reason? So he said here that because the fear is that achotam yipol v'yishaver, that the seal will fall and be broken, and then ha'eved yakapel et shulei hatalit al ktefo. The servant will take the shawl and put it on his shoulder, and therefore he carry it on Shabbat in Reshut HaRabim, in a public domain, shelo derech malbush, not the way that they carry properly. Tanya nami achi, we learn also in the Braita, Yotze ha'eved, the servant can go to Reshut HaRabim, to a public domain, bechotam shebatzavaro, he can go around with his neck on Shabbat, seal around his neck, אבל לא בחותם שבכסותו, but not with the seal around his clothes. ורמינו, so the GEMARA asks a question why, לא יצא העבד בחותם שבצווארו ולא בחותם שבכסותו. So we said just the opposite. It looks like contradiction, because here they said in other braita the slave may neither go out with the seal that is around his neck, nor with the seal that is on his clothes on Shabbat. And both this, they said, v'zeh v'zeh, and both of them, ein mekablim tuma, which means we talk, if you remember in the previous pages, we discussed the stages of impurity. And we said that ava tum'ah, that is something that contaminated to others, it's here, since it's not considering a tachshit, it's not considering part of the ornament, because it's not asui lenoi, it's not make it for beauty, it's only legnai, show that he's a eved, show that he's a servant. So therefore, it's not considering, Rashi said, a klei tashmish. In general, for those who are not familiar, there are three types of a thing that they can accept impurity, tum'ah. One is Adam, person, and then we have Ochalim, like food, and the third one is liquid, mashkin, and also utensil, which is kelim. So, but chefetz, something that is neither food nor something that it's utensil, kli, so it's not become impure, eino nitma. So there are basically 7 types of kelim, 7 types of utensils that accepted Tumah from the Torah, and included klei matechet, the coppers. So that's the idea here. Velo bezug shebetzavaro. So now we continue with the servant where he can go on Shabbat. So in those days, some of the servants used to have around here his neck a ring. So they said he cannot go with the bell that make a ring, and basically they make it for beauty. Right? Rashi said that these are 2 types of bell. Ze veze mekablim tuma. Both of the type of bell, which is the one that is carrying his clothes and one that is around his neck, both of them, and they can contaminate it with the avatuma, because it's considering tachshit, it's considering something that made for the ornament. And in general, we have the rule that tachshit shel adam mekabel tum'ah, that a person that carry this type of ornaments, it's accepting a state of impurity. That's what Rashi tells us. V'lo tetzeh behema, lo bechotam shebatzavara, and an animal may neither go out with the seal that is around her neck, nor with the seal that on his clothes, ולא בזוג שבכסותה, and not on its clothes, ולא בזוג שבצווארה, nor with the bell that is around her neck, זה וזה אינם מקבלים טומאה, and both of them, the seal and the bell, cannot become ritually impure. Why? So in general, we say that animal ornaments and utensils do not fall into the category of objects that can become ritually impure.
Why?
Because they said here that even forbidden for a slave to go out with a seal around his neck. That's the opposite with what Shmuel opinion. Rashi explained here that it's the original. It's in the Mishna in Kelim, chapter 12. That's what the Mishna said. Lema. So what was learned so far? The first part of the Braita we learned that Eved cannot go to public in Shabbat even with a seal around his neck. Yeah. And that's contradicted to the first Braita that said, when what Shmuel said earlier, that they allow. So the Lema, should we say, the Gemara asks, Ha de avad le rabbi, ha de avad ihu le nafshe. May we say that what Shmuel said in the first Braita, that allowed the slave to go with chotam atalui b'tzavaro, with the seal around his neck, this speak about specific situation that his master made it in order for him to carry it, because we don't have the chashash that he's carry with his hand b'reshut harabim. Why? Because he have which is called eimat rabo, and because he have a fear of his master, he's afraid to take it off. Versus the second Braita that we say that we allow to do it. The reason is because the servant, the slave, made it for himself, and they said that his master is not makpid, is not scrupulous about him carrying it, and therefore we have the chashash, we are concerned that maybe he carry it in the public domain, and it's go on a 4 cubit in the public domain, and that's exactly according to Shmuel what the Mishnah said, velo bekavul, that Eved cannot go bekavla de avda, regardless if it's on his garment or around his neck. So the Gemara said, "Lo, you don't have to make the second Braita specifically in something that the slave made it for himself. You can say idi ve'idi, meaning both Braitot, the first one and the second one, can speak about what? The avad le rabbi, that his servant made it for him that he should carry it. And in order to understand the contradiction between the two Braitot, Vekan, the second Braita that forbade the servant to go with the seal around his neck, they speak about Beshel Matechet, that if the seal made out of the copper, that because they carry some value, so the owner, the master of the slave is very makpid, is very scrupulous, that he is not going to lose it. So therefore, we're afraid that if it's fall on the ground, he's going to lift it up and carry it in order to return it to his master. Vekan, and the first Braita, the Meimer of Shmuel, that allow the servant to go in Shabbat to public domain with the seal around his neck, bet shel teeth. They speak about the seal that made out of teeth, which means that that it's a clay, it's not metal, and the lashvarim and erech, whatever broke, has no value. So we don't concern about the servant lifted up in order to return it to his master. So now that's what Rashi said. By the way, Rashi here elaborate on that, and we're not going there yet, but it's important to know that in these three roots, in this explanation, the Gemara entered to a new domain. So here, the new domain that they speak about Eimat Adono, that the servant has some type of fear around the reaction of his master, and because of that, he behaves differently. He's afraid that his master will see him without the seal being subservient or being so basically it's different than value, than erech, that's something that carry a value. רב נחמן אמר רבא ברבוע, דבר המקפיד עליו רבו. If something that the master is strict, it is care, that it's very careful that, so we are afraid that he disconnected with the fear of his master in order to return to him. דבר שאין מקפיד עליו יוצאים בו, but something that his master don't care for that, so you can go out to a public domain.
הכנמי מסתברא מדקתני זה וזה אין מקבלים טומאה. So the Gemara adds, so too it is reasonable to understand the brighter from the fact that it teaches there this seal, מדקתני זה וזה אין מקבלים טומאה. So this seal and that seal cannot become ritually impure. So I אמרת בשלמה של מתכת, if you tell me that it's regard to a what? To a metal seal, הנה הוא דלא מקבל טומאה. Only seal that made out of מתכת, of metal, so this is the cannot become ritually impure. הכלים דידהו מקבלים טומאה. However, these vessels made of the same materials, so they can become ritually impure. Why? Because in Hebrew it's called לא כלי תשמיש ולא תכשיט. So neither for any use, for not for ornament. אלא יאמרת בשל תתנן. However, if you say that we learn in regard to the seals of clay, הנה הוא דלא מקבלי טומאה. This become ritually impure, this vessel, it's not הכלים דידהו מקבלי טומאה. So, but the other materials, the vessels, can become ritually impure. V'hatanya, and what we learn in a brighter, klei avanim, the vessels of earth, meaning vessels of dung, vessel stones, klei glalim, uklei adama, something that's made out of dust. אין מקבלים טומאה לומדי בתורה ולומדי בסופרים. They don't accept any type of impurity, neither from the Torah, not from any rabbinic, because there are 7 vessels that did not receive Tumah from the Torah. It's called, in the Torah, in Vayikra, in Leviticus 11, they said as follows, בכל כלי אשר ייפול עליו, any vessels that fall, מכל כלי עץ, from any wood, בגד, or sack, כלי חרס, כלי מתכת, and clay etzem. So these 7 type of vessels, they don't receive any tum'ah. אלא שמע מינה של מתכת. So you have to conclude, we learn from that the brighter referring to utensil made of metal, shma mina. So when the GEMARA, we said many times that when they use shma mina twice, it means that's the final word. So basically that's the end of the discussion in coming out on Shabbat in the seal of slaves. And we derive from that several conclusions. Number 1, that any seal that made out of metal, a servant, a slave, can go out on Shabbat. Is something that made out of teeth. So the difference is who made it, if there is master or himself, and what exactly how he handled it. אמר מר, ולא בזוג שבצווארו, אבל יוצאו בזוג שבכסותו. So they said that the slave not go out with the bell around his neck, but he can go with the bell around his clothes. זוג שבצווארו, אמר לא, with the bell that is around his neck. Why a servant cannot go out in Shabbat? It's considering a tachshit, it's considering something that's made for beauty. Dilma mipsik ve'atalai tuye. Maybe the bell will be cut, the same as the neck is sharsheret in his neck, and maybe he is continue and carry it in the public domain. Zug shebechsuto name, also bell that is attached to his cloth. Leichush dilma mipsik ve'atalai tuye. So we're afraid, we're concerned that maybe he's severed, and he come to carry it. So the Gemara said, "Hacha b'may askinan." Here, how we explain it? The micha beimumche, that the bell is woven into a garment. So he said, if that's the case, so if it's attached, it's tafula begel is very attached to the cloth. So we don't concern that Mishema in that maybe gets disconnected. and therefore it's fine. By the way, that's the view of Rashi. The Tosfot here have a lot to say about it, because if you tell me that it's only if it's attached, if it's a tafur, so why are you concerned at all, the Tosfot asks. So he explained that it's a gzeira because there's something that you made for beauty, davar shel noi, and the others is not considering. But anyway, it's not part of our discussion, so not go there. But in general, some of the Rishonim hold that the servant, the slave, allowed to go out in a chotam, in a seal, in his garment, if it's attached to his beged, and that's the view of Ran and the Ritva. Anything that is fully attached, arug, meaning that something that is woven, so they don't, they didn't issue a decree prohibiting going out on Shabbat. אמר מר, לא תצא בהמה לא בחותם שבצווארה ולא בחותם שבכסותה ולא בזוג שבצווארה ולא בזוג שבכסותה. Said that an animal may not neither go out with the seal that is around her neck, nor a seal around the cloth, nor the bell that is around the cloth, nor a bell around her neck. Both, זה וזה הם מקבלים טומאה. Both, regardless to the bell that is hanging in her body, or something that is ornament for animals, both of them not receive any ritual impurity. So the Gemara asks, "V'zug de bema and mekablim tuma," that the bell around the animals, you don't receive any impurity. V'raminu zug shel bema tmea. We ask from different braita that a bell that is around the neck of animal, that it's any animal tmea, meaning that it can become ritually impure, which means they have the potential that they receive impurity. We just turned the page, Nunche Amud Bet, 58b. V'shel delet tehora. If it's a bell around the door of the house, so it's not receive impurity, because the delet, the door itself, it's something that is pure from receiving purity, because it's attached to a house that is on a karka, that is on the ground. And it's a very famous Mishna in Kelim, chapter 11, that dealt with that, because something that is not kli, it's not receive any tuma. So anyway, he said, because it's attached to the karka, so even this bell that it's attached to that is not receive any type of purity, because there's a Hebrew rule that said, "Kol hamechubar ledavar acher nitpal lo v'na'asa kmoto." Anything that is attached to something else, it became attached in such a level that so it's become as one of that. That's, by the way, the Rashi's opinion. And shel delet, if it's if one took the bell of a door and converted into a bell, make it a bell for animal. So then he put it around the animal's neck, and he designated for that tme'ah. So because it's received to mind, it's the same as other bell of animal. Shel be'ema, but if it's a bell that it was used for the animal, ve'asa'o ledelet, but he converted it to a bell of a door, even though he attached it to the door and fastened it to a nails. So he make it yichud kavod, make it a permanent tameh. So it's became ritually impure. In other words, it became the same impure that was originally, because even you change the yi'ud, you change the designations, but anyway, it's remained the same. So we explain, שכל הכלים יורדים לידי טומאתם במחשבה ולא טומאתם אלא בשינוי מעשה. So he said that all the kelim, all the utensils, they only ascend from their state of ritual impurity by means of an action that affect physical change to the vessel itself. So a change in a designation alone is ineffective. So here this, because he put it in an animal's neck, is not considering a shinui maseh. It's not, you didn't change the goof of kli, you didn't change the key point of the utensil. So basically, you see in this braita a question, because here you see that the bell of an animal receive impurity, receive tuma, and is contradicted the previous braita that said that it's not received tuma. So the Gemara said, Lokasha, it's not the question. Had it le inbal, had le inbal. Here, it's not difficult. This braita said that was the clapper inbal. So it's like lashon. It's something in the side. It's bring a bell. So it's called inbal, a clapper. That braita that was taught that the bell cannot become ritually impure. So it's referring to a case where it does not have a clapper. So the Gemara asks, "Ma nafshach im manau?" If you tell me that this bell of the animal is important because it's part of the tachshit, so afar pi deleit leinbal ilav manau inbal meshav el amana. So he said, whatever you said, it's difficult, because if the bell is a vessel, so even though there is no clapper, it will be susceptible to ritual impurity. If it's not a vessel, does a clapper render into a vessel? So he said, so what's the difference in this clapper? How it makes it's a different? So you see here the difference between this and the Ritva and the Sfat Emet that explain it very, very clearly, the difference between the two. So the Gemara answered, and they said, in כדי רבי שמואל בר נחמני אמר רבי יונתן, אמר רבי שמואל בר נחמני אמר רבי יונתן, מניין משמיע קול בכלי מתכות שהוא טמא. How do you know that someone who makes a noise with the vessels that produce a sound is became impure? שנאמר, כל דבר אשר יבוא באש, תעבירו באש. אפילו לדיבור. So anything that it's come through the fire, it shall make pass through the fire. So he said, even a speech, even a dibur, in other words, even an object that makes a sound. So he said, ayavo ba'esh, it shall pass through a fire. B'mayu kimta. So how do you conclude how b'mayu kimta? B'deleit lei in bal. So here you speak about the situation that there is not established in bal, a clapper, as a part of that. Eima metziata, so velo bezug shebetsavaro. So the slave they cannot go Shabbat in the bell in his neck. Aval yotzeu bezug shebeksuto. But you go in the bell in his clothes. Ze veze, both bell, right? Regardless, the one is in the neck and the one is in the garment. Mekablim tuma. Both of them become ritually impure. The late lein bal, if he doesn't have a clapper, mi mekablei tuma. Can he become ritually impure? ורמינו העושה זגים למכתשת ולהריסה ולמתחות ספרים למתחות תינוקות, יש להם מנבל טמאים אלא מנבל טהורים. So we ask a question, if someone makes a bell for a mortar, use a crushed species or a cradle or for a mantle for the Torah scroll or covering a small for the small children, if they have a clapper they become ritually impure. If they do not have a clapper they are not ritually impure. So you see here, nitlu in bilehem, adain tumatan alehem. So if the clapper removed, the ritual impurity still remain upon them. So what do you see? You see apparently, with regard to bells used by people, the original existence of a clapper determines whether or not the bell is considered a vessel. So they said, hanemi lei. Here they apply only to the bell of a small child. But this applies only to little children, but an adult, the bell is ornament for him, even though he does not have a clapper. Amar nitlu in bleihem. The master said if the clapper was removed after the ritually impure, still running out of time. So try to make it quick before the davening. So they said the ritual impurity still remains upon them. So the Gemara wonder lemay chazu, for what they suit. So the reason that this impurity remains because the common person is able to replace the clapper in a bell. So according to Abaye, So the current person is capable to resembling and does not require the expertise of a craftsman. So it's not considered broken, and it's ritually impure, is not nullified. Metiv Rabbi Zug vain bal chibur. So Rabbi is objection. He said the bell and the clapper, this is a connection. So therefore they are detached from each other, and the bell should be considered broken. Maybe you say that even is not that the zuged in bal are not attached to it, it's considering as they are together. So the fact that you detach them, it makes no difference. Vatanya misporet shel prakim. We learn in the Braida that a blade of a carpenter, so he said, yes, a misporet shel prakim, it's like misparaim, a blade, ve'izmel shel ritani, it's like yes, it's a blade of the carpenter in place. So when you remove the handler, so it's chibur letumah. So it's become connection with together it's considered as kli echad, as one kli, and chibur la'azah. But you don't considering as one kli when it's come to sprinkle the meichatat, the purified water. V'amrinan, we asked earlier in Daf Memchet, man afshach ichiburu, if those part of the misparaim of the clapper and it's considering as one kli, afilu le'inyan haza'ah, even in regard to sprinkle, ve'i lo chibur dami, ve'i lo chiburu, ve'if is not considering as one kli, afilu le'tum'a namelo, even in regard to impurity, one cannot become impure to another. V'amara ba'advar Torah, bishat melacha chibur ben letum'a ben lehaza'ah. The Rabbi said that the Torah law, when it's used, they are considered a connection both with regard to ritual impurity and with regard to sprinkling. So he said, bishat melacha chibur ben letum'a ben lehaza'ah, shlo bishat melacha eno chibur letum'a velo lehaza'ah. When it's become to the time of the work, so if it's not, when it's used, it's not used, so they neither consider a connection with regard to ritual impurity nor with regard to sprinkling. So the gazru ala tumah, and the sages issue a decree shelo bishat melacha, that they considered should not be considered a connection with regard to ritual impurity, even that not used. Why? Mishum tumashi bishat melacha, due to ritual impurity when it used. So because that the second part is the din Torah. So the sages consider that if you purified the second part, people may mistake and they think that one connected to the other. And the same ve'ala zarashi bishat melacha, and the time that you sprinkle the time doing the work. So mishum haza'ah shelo bishat melacha. So the same, because with regard to sprinkle, even when it used, due to a sprinkle when it not used. So the water of purification must be sprinkled on each part individually. And they said, nevertheless, this type of connection with regard to ritual impurity is only relevant when two parts are actually connected. But when the part is separated, they cannot be reattached easily. The vessel is considered broken, and that basically contradicted what Abaye said. So let's conclude it. Ela amar Rava, so Rava explained, Ho'il vera'ui lehakisho al gabei cheres. He said that because you can make a bell ring when you put it on the earthwork, so therefore that's the reason. You differentiate between this and in bal. So even so, when the clapper is removed, the bell may be used for its original purpose.
es Hashem